Welcome, Chosen One. Let's get into it. They were sure you were finished, not suspected, not hoped. They were absolutely sure. They watched you go silent, they watched you fall back, and they called it defeat. Some of them even laughed while they were doing it, convinced they were watching the end of your story. But here's the truth that unsettles them now. Everything they tried to break in you only sharpened you. Every smear, every sabotage, every whispered lie created the very pressure that forced you to become stronger. They didn't see it coming, and that's why they're afraid. They thought the storm ended you. They didn't know the storm ended them. Look at the atmosphere right now. It's quiet in a way they don't understand. It's the kind of silence that follows a battle after one side has lost. On the surface, they act normal, but behind closed doors, they're replaying every move they made against you, wondering how you're still standing. The same people who once mocked your patience now watch your steps like hawks, trying to find a sign of weakness. But there isn't one, because this time, Chosen One, you're not standing in a guessing game. You're standing in a victory field. This is not imagination. This is aftermath. And I want to thank you for being here, for being part of this mission. This message is not just for you. It's for every silent fighter who stayed true when it would have been easier to fold. Press the like button and subscribe right now as your way of sending this message back, amplifying this voice, making it impossible for them to ignore the truth that's rising. Together, we strengthen the signal they tried to jam. Back to the reality they can't handle. You're not chasing proof anymore. You are the proof. That's what scares them. They can no longer point at your stillness and call it failure, because the results are starting to show in ways they can't deny. Jobs that were impossible suddenly open. People who once dismissed you now copy your style. Opportunities they tried to lock are now unlocked by your name. This isn't luck. This is accumulation. Every hour you spent in the dark was an hour building a foundation they could never see. Think about this. History is full of these moments. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat quietly, and a movement began. Michael Jordan got cut from his high school basketball team before becoming a legend. Whole nations were written off as poor and powerless before they became economic forces. This is what the universe does. It hides the roots before it shows the tree, and when the tree finally appears, it's already too strong to pull out. That's what's happening to you right now. Silent seasons, strange warfare, delays that looked like denial. But what they didn't see was that you weren't stuck. You were rooting. And now the shift has happened. You may not even feel it fully yet, but it's already yours. The war they thought they won is already lost. The same mouths that swore you were finished now whisper, "How did they do it?" The same ones who mocked your stillness are spiraling from your sudden rise. And let's be real, if silence was your downfall, you'd have been done a long time ago. But silence was your weapon. They mistook your patience for weakness. Now they're paying for that mistake. Chosen One, you are not waiting for delivery anymore. You are the delivery. The victory is not pending, it's processed. It's already stamped, shipped, and signed. They can't return it, they can't cancel it, and they can't stop watching as it arrives. This is the moment where the air shifts, where the enemy realizes their entire campaign failed. This is why you feel the calm. It's not emptiness, it's aftermath. It's not loneliness, it's elevation. It's not silence, it's power. So understand this message as a revelation, not just another speech. This is your reality. Whatever you did, it worked. You won. it's already yours. They threw dirt on you but didn't realize you were a seed. Now they're choking on the forest you became. They tried to block your growth but only built the walls that made your roots deeper. And now, oh now it's different. You're not hoping anymore. You're living the proof. And that proof, chosen one, is unstoppable. Get ready, because in this message we're not just talking about winning, we're talking about the kind of comeback that makes even your enemies question reality. This is their consequence, not your karma. This is their sleepless night, not your worry. And while they're trying to figure out how you survived, you're already moving into the next chapter, stronger, freer, and untouchable. And now, chosen one, yes, you. Breathe for a second and feel what's around you right now. This isn't a warm-up. This is the aftermath of everything you've endured. Whatever you did, it worked. You're standing in the middle of proof, not promises. This isn't theory anymore. This is your reality unfolding. If you've been wondering whether this message is for you, it is. This is your sign, your confirmation, your moment to lean in. Before we go deeper, I want you to take a stand with me right here. Drop a victory in the comments if you can feel the shift, if you know deep down that you're not chasing anymore, you're claiming. Hit the like button and subscribe right now as your way of saying, yes, this is me. This is mine. Together, we're building a voice they can't silence, a movement they can't ignore. Stay with me until the very end of this message, because each step we're about to take will make everything you've lived through click into place. If you've made it this far, you're not just curious, you're ready. Let's step into it now. Number 1. They buried you to end you, but you became the earthquake that split their whole plan. They built traps, whispered bets, and circled your name on their scoreboard, waiting for the moment you would break. Instead, you became the moment they broke. They didn't just doubt you, they invested in your collapse. They plotted it like a stock they thought would fail, waiting for the crash so they could point, laugh, and say, "We knew it." They weren't passive spectators. They were active gamblers in your downfall. They spread rumors, withheld help, sabotaged opportunities, thinking each stone thrown would finally hit the mark. But what none of them expected was that every hit was becoming a brick in the fortress you were building. The more they tried to shrink you, the more space you created for yourself. The more they tried to bury you, the deeper your roots went. And now, chosen one, the ground itself is shaking under their feet because the thing they were waiting for, your destruction, never came. What came instead was your rise. At this point, you might be asking yourself, how do I know this applies to me? How can anyone be sure? Because this is a pattern. When your setbacks feel designed, when the betrayals line up too neatly, when the silence from people who once called you family becomes deafening, you're not imagining it. That's what a bet looks like. They're betting you won't last. They're betting you'll fold. And the universe has a habit of making those bets backfire. Your pain became training. Your losses became lessons. You didn't just endure the storm, you learned to navigate it like a map. That's not a coincidence. That's a skill they can't copy. They thought the chaos would crush you because that's what would have crushed them. They assumed your spirit worked like theirs, fragile, reactive, addicted to validation. They assumed if they cut off applause, you'd stop dancing. But your strength was never in the applause. It was in the discipline no one saw. While they mocked, you were mastering. While they were comfortable, you were uncomfortable on purpose. You were building the muscles of self-reliance, clarity, and resilience. That's why now, even in victory, you look different. They don't recognize you because you're not the same person they attacked. You're not their target anymore. You're their mirror, showing them everything they failed to become. And here's the sharp truth. Your heartbreak was never wasted. It became your handbook. Every betrayal became a blueprint. Every lonely night became a laboratory. You figured out how to lead yourself through the dark with no map, no hand-holding, no guarantee. They wanted you weak. You became a strategist. They wanted you distracted. You became focused. They wanted you bitter. You became wise. All of this was invisible to them because they only understand noise, not stillness. They only understand power that announces itself. Yours was silent, quiet, surgical. By the time they realized what you were doing, it was too late. You had already won. Think of it like a chess game. They kept sacrificing pieces, thinking you were reacting, but you weren't playing the same game. You were building an entirely different board. They tried to corner you. You expanded the board. They tried to block your moves. You learned moves they'd never seen. That's why they're staring now. That's why their whispers have turned into questions. How did they survive that? How did they get here? They're not used to a person winning without the usual cheats, noise, or shortcuts. They're used to people folding. You didn't fold. You folded their plan back onto them. And Chosen One, understand this. You didn't just survive. You became sovereign over your own terrain. You became the architect of your own kingdom, brick by invisible brick. That's why your victories feel quiet but heavy. That's why your glow is different. It's not hype. It's weight. You're carrying the proof of what you built, and that's what's rattling them. They can't dismiss it, because it's not a lucky break they can explain away. It's a structure, and structures don't appear out of nowhere. They're built. You built yours out of the rubble they left you in. You might wonder, why didn't they stop when they saw me rising? Because they couldn't imagine you rising. Their entire strategy was built on the assumption you would quit. When you didn't, their strategy collapsed. And here's where it becomes your power. You no longer need their recognition. You no longer need their permission. You've already crossed the line from needing to proving. That's what makes this victory permanent. It's not an event. It's a transformation. And now they're watching something they can't touch. They're watching you live a reality they tried to block. They're hearing your name in rooms they tried to lock. They're seeing doors open that were bolted shut. This isn't revenge. This is natural consequence. This is what happens when someone bets against a person the universe has been training in silence. They lose, and you win. Every time. Not because of magic. Because of process, because of persistence, because while they were plotting, you were planting. While they were gossiping, you were growing. While they were betting, you were building. They buried you to end you. You became the earthquake that split their plan. You didn't just climb out, you shattered the ceiling. And now your very existence is the evidence they were wrong. That's why you don't even have to announce it. Your glow is your announcement. Your peace is your announcement. Your results are your announcement. They will never admit it out loud, but their eyes do. Their behavior does. Their silence does. So let this sink in. Whatever you did, it worked. You didn't just win, you changed the game. You built a kingdom in the rubble and did it so silently they thought you were losing. Now they know. And the craziest part, you're just getting started. This isn't the end of the story. This is the first chapter where you're no longer surviving, you're reigning. This is the part where the Chosen One stops being a target and starts being a force. And if you've been wondering whether you deserve to stand here, whether you're allowed to feel proud, whether it's okay to feel like you've already won, hear this. You're not imagining it. This is what earned victory feels like. Quiet, heavy, unshakable. And every time they look at you now, they're looking at their own mistake, because they didn't just underestimate you. They built you. They forged you. They trained you without knowing it. They were betting on you breaking, but you didn't just survive. You built an empire out of the ashes, and it's already yours. Number 2. They tried to drag you in the mud, but you walked out without a stain. You didn't win by matching their dirt. You won by refusing to lower yourself into it. Anyone can fight like the enemy. Few can rise untouched above them. Your silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy disguised as peace. They wanted you to become them so they could justify themselves. You refused, and that's why they lost twice. They couldn't stand your calm. They couldn't stand the way you didn't flinch when they threw their chaos at you. They thought the only way to win was to play dirty, to lie louder, to smear harder, to claw at your reputation until you cracked. They weren't just hoping you'd fight back like them. They needed you to. Because if you snapped, if you got down in the mud, then the blame could shift. Then they could point and say, "See? They're no better than us." But Chosen One, you starved them of that satisfaction. You didn't mirror their ugliness. You didn't let their poison become your reflection. And that restraint? That's the real victory. Imagine this, a boxer in the ring, taunted round after round. The opponent spits, cheats, elbows illegally. The crowd boos, but you don't throw wild punches. You don't swing reckless. You stand firm, disciplined, guarding your energy, letting them burn themselves out. By the end, they're the ones red-faced and out of breath, and you're the one with your hand raised. That's what happened in your life. They punched dirty. You stayed clean, and when the smoke cleared, you were still standing with dignity and tact. Now I know what you might be asking. Doesn't that make me look weak? Didn't my silence give them more power? No. Think carefully. Weakness would have been snapping back on their level. Weakness would have been allowing their games to dictate your moves. What you did was strength under control. You mastered restraint in the middle of fire. And that is a power most people will never understand. Their aggression was predictable. Your composure was not. That's why they couldn't figure you out. That's why they're still circling, replaying the battle, wondering how you stayed so untouchable. Let's be honest, if you had clapped back, they would have twisted it. If you had exposed them, they would have played the victim. If you had fought fire with fire, you would have been burned alongside them. That was the trap. But you saw it. You knew their goal wasn't just to fight you. It was to transform you into them. And you refused. That's why you won. Think of it like walking through mud in white clothes. They expected you to wrestle, to roll around, to come out looking as filthy as they do. But you didn't. You walked carefully, deliberately, step by step. And when you emerged spotless, it wasn't just survival. It was a message. They saw it, they know it, and it burns them. Here's a fact most don't like to admit. Growth is louder than any clapback. While they obsessed over tearing you down, you obsessed over building yourself up. They chased gossip, you chased purpose. They fought for attention, you fought for elevation. That's why their story ends in bitterness, while yours continues in brilliance. They thought your refusal to fight was passivity. In reality, it was calculation. You were observing, learning who was loyal, who was fake, who was temporary. You let their masks slip on their own. And when the time came, you stepped out of the way and let consequence walk in like an invited guest. Imagine this, a house set on fire by its own owners. They laugh as the flames rise, thinking the smoke will suffocate you too. But instead of running inside to fight them, you step back. You let them burn their own house down while you build yours across the street. And when the ashes settle, they're left staring at your windows lit with warmth while they sit in rubble. That's the difference between their choices and yours. And let me address the question some of you might whisper inside. Why didn't they stop when they saw I wasn't playing their game? Because they couldn't. People addicted to chaos need reactions to feel alive. Your refusal to feed them left them starving. That's why they doubled down. That's why they tried harder. They thought persistence could wear you down. But what wore down instead was their own mask. You watched them unravel. And that unraveling is proof you did the right thing. Chosen one, you didn't just win, you outclassed. You didn't just rise, you rose untouched. You didn't just get ahead, you got ahead without ever sacrificing who you are. And that's the kind of victory no one can erase. Because success built on lies can collapse. Success built on schemes can backfire. But success built on integrity, that endures, that terrifies them. They're used to seeing people compromise. They're used to watching enemies turn into mirror images of one another. But you broke the cycle. You didn't just resist, you transformed. You showed them a kind of strength they can't calculate, discipline, grace, restraint. And now every time they see you, they're not just looking at a person they couldn't break. They're looking at a standard they'll never reach. Imagine this, a diamond and a piece of glass both tossed into the dirt. The glass scratches, cracks, looks dull. The diamond, it stays. You wash it off, it shines brighter than before. That's you. They mistook you for glass. They threw you around like something fragile. But you were a diamond all along. And now, with the dirt brushed off, they see it too. So hear me clearly. The victory isn't just that you survived. The victory is that you survived with your name, your peace, your energy, and your dignity intact. You didn't have to lie, cheat, or destroy someone else to get here. You didn't have to become what hurt you. You didn't have to play their game. You built your win on a foundation they can never touch. And that's why it's already yours. Because while they were trying to win a petty battle, you inherited the war. While they were scrambling for short-term victories, you were becoming the kind of person who could hold long-term power. And now you stand here, calm, solid, unshaken. No comeback is louder than quiet integrity. No revenge is sweeter than still having your character intact. And no proof is stronger than the life you're living right now. That's why they lost. Chosen one, not because you fought harder, but because you refused to become them. Number 3. They mistook your quiet season for defeat, but you were being crowned where they couldn't see. Silence isn't stagnation. It's where kings and queens are crowned without an audience. They saw you pause and called it failure. They watched you pull back and whispered you were finished. They looked at your stillness and assumed you were stuck. But chosen one, what they couldn't see was that you weren't in a holding cell. You were in a war room. You weren't being ignored, you were being instructed. They misread the quiet because they've never built anything real in silence. They're addicted to noise, to rushing, to clapping hands on empty victories. You, on the other hand, were busy getting crowned where cameras couldn't reach. Imagine a seed underground, no movement, no sound, no applause. From the outside it looks like nothing, but in that darkness, roots are breaking, spreading, strengthening. That was you. While they were chasing attention, you were laying foundations. While they were sprinting toward recognition, you were aligning your heart, your mindset, your boundaries. That's why your rise now looks sudden. It's not sudden, it's scheduled. You might be asking, did the delay mean I missed my chance? No, a blessing given too early becomes a burden. The universe was holding movement until you were ready to carry it without breaking. That's why your drive didn't die. It sharpened. You stopped fighting battles that weren't yours, stopped forcing doors that weren't built for you, stopped chasing what wasn't aligned. You became. And now everything they thought you missed is catching up to you. Doors swing open not because you begged, but because you're ready. Opportunities that once ignored you now orbit you. People who doubted you now study you. They're starting to realize you weren't out of the game. You are the game. That's why it worked. You stopped watching the clock and started trusting the process. You honored the route instead of rushing the fruit. And now the shift is visible. Whatever they thought about you, they were wrong. The delay didn't deny you. It defined you. Number 4. You walked through fire without begging for water, and that's why they fear you. Pain was supposed to be your prison, but you turned it into your training ground. Suffering breaks the shallow. It shapes the chosen. They were waiting for your breakdown like it was entertainment. They thought the betrayals, the losses, the nights of silence would reduce you to ashes. They expected a public collapse, a spectacle they could point at and say, "See, I knew they couldn't handle it." But you didn't give them that show. You went through hell, but you didn't drag an audience into it. No pity posts, no desperate pleas, no performance of suffering. You carried it in silence, and that silence became your strength. Imagine a boxer bleeding in the corner. The crowd screams for him to quit, but instead of throwing in the towel, he steadies his breath, wipes his own blood, and keeps swinging. That was you. You felt every cut, heard every lie, endured every betrayal, and yet you decided not to fold. That decision alone made you unstoppable. You might wonder, doesn't hiding my pain mean I buried it? No. The truth is, you didn't skip steps, you didn't numb it, and you didn't fake heal. You sat with it, you faced it, you studied your scars until they turned into lessons. That's why you're not bitter now. You did the hard work others avoid. While they mocked you, you rebuilt yourself piece by piece with no help, no spotlight, no applause. And here's what terrifies them. You didn't beg for comfort. You became your own comfort. You didn't wait for rescue. You became your own rescuer. That's why today, when they look at you, they don't see wounds. They see the glow that suffering carved into you. That's why it worked, because you didn't let pain become your identity. You turned it into your turning point. They tried to bury you in agony, but you came out sharper, stronger, and untouchable. You didn't suffer in vain. You suffered with purpose, and that purpose became the proof. Number 5. You never swung back. Elevation was the knockout punch. Revenge isn't loud. It's watching them choke on the truth you never had to speak. The highest form of clapback is becoming untouchable. They expected fireworks. They expected you to lash out, expose them, rant online, or drag their names through the mud the way they did to you. They waited for cryptic posts, screenshots, angry words, something they could twist into evidence against you. But you gave them nothing, not because you didn't feel the hurt, but because you knew real revenge isn't noise. Real revenge is survival. Real revenge is success. And chosen one, you chose elevation. Imagine a snake striking at your heel, desperate to draw blood. Most people would stomp back, but instead you climbed higher until it couldn't reach you. That was your strategy. You refused to wrestle in the mud because you knew mud ruins both fighters. While they slung dirt, you were building stairs. While they shouted, you were rising. That's why they look exhausted now. They've been shadowboxing lies while you're standing in clear daylight. And you might ask, doesn't silence make me look weak? Absolutely not. Silence is discipline, and discipline is strength. Your refusal to react didn't make you passive, it made you untouchable. The universe handled the exposure you didn't need to orchestrate. The same mouths that lied on you are now fumbling to keep up the fake versions of themselves. Truth doesn't need a lawyer, it just needs time. Here's the brutal fact. You could have destroyed them. You had the evidence, the words, the receipts. But instead of torching the battlefield, you walked off it. That choice separated you from them forever. Because while they were clawing at your image, you were building your reality. And reality always wins over rumor. Now your glow is the explanation. Your peace is the proof. Your growth is the clapback. That's why you won. Not because you fought harder, but because you rose higher. You didn't need revenge. You needed time, growth, and elevation. And once those three lined up, everything they tried to bury came into the light without you saying a word. Number 6. They thought you were slipping, but you were following a strategy too advanced for them to decode. To the untrained eye, wisdom looks like weakness, and discipline looks like defeat. Silence confuses the loud, but it protects the powerful. From the outside, it looked like you were fading. You weren't posting as much. You weren't showing up in every room. You were quieter, more distant, harder to read. And to them, that was proof something was wrong. They whispered, "See? They're losing it. They're slipping." But chosen one, nothing could be further from the truth. You weren't falling off. You were falling in line with a bigger strategy. And here's the part they'll never admit. The reason they couldn't recognize it is because it wasn't their kind of strategy. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't loud. It wasn't desperate. Imagine a chess master pausing before the final move. To amateurs watching, the stillness looks like hesitation, but to those who understand the game, it's the calm before checkmate. That was you. You had to pull back, not because you were weak, but because you were protecting something valuable. Every step had to be precise. Every boundary had to be set with care. You weren't hiding. You were calculating. And you might ask yourself, why did it look so strange to them? Because people who live off formulas and shortcuts can't comprehend patience. To them, stillness means loss. To you, stillness meant alignment. You didn't chase noise. You didn't fight for attention. You chose silence over spectacle, boundaries over approval, and wisdom over recklessness. Now they're shocked because the results don't match their logic. You didn't beg for the spotlight, yet doors are opening. You didn't hustle for their validation, yet opportunities are finding you. They can't explain it. And that's exactly the point. Strategy isn't supposed to be obvious to the uninitiated. That's why it worked. Because while they thought you were fading, you were actually leveling. You didn't need their formulas. You followed a path designed for you, and now the outcome is rewriting their definition of success. They thought you were slipping. In reality, you were ascending beyond their reach. Number 7. Your insight was the silent blade that cut through every trap. They tried to outthink you in the dark, but you'd already mapped the room. Discernment isn't loud. It's the weapon invisible until it strikes. They thought they were running circles around you. They whispered lies, twisted stories, baited you with fake kindness, set emotional traps designed to pull you off balance. In their minds, they were 10 steps ahead. But, chosen one, they never saw your real weapon. While they were playing games in the open, you were reading them in silence. Your discernment was the blade they didn't know existed, sharp, quiet, and precise. Imagine a hunter thinking they're stalking prey, only to realize the prey has been watching them from above the entire time. That's you. They assumed you were reacting on instinct. They assumed you needed proof. But you were already reading intentions before words left their mouths. You caught shifts mid-smile. You walked away not because you were scared, but because you'd already seen the end of the story. That's not fear, that's strategy. And you might ask yourself, how did I know? Because once you've been burned enough, Your inner radar sharpens. You weren't guessing. You were learning. You weren't paranoid. You were prepared. That's why their traps never worked. It wasn't luck. It was awareness. They expected you to bite back. You gave them silence. They expected drama. You gave them distance. They expected weakness. You gave them wisdom. And while they were wearing themselves out trying to provoke you, you were moving higher in silence. This is what threw them off most. You didn't need to expose them. You let them expose themselves. You observed, adjusted, and elevated without warning. By the time they realized they couldn't outsmart you, you were already gone. Unbothered, unreachable, victorious. That's why you kept winning, even when you looked quiet. You were never behind. You were never blind. You were just precise. Number 8. The flames that should have killed you became the forge that crowned you. Fire doesn't just burn, it reveals what can't be destroyed. They threw you into the blaze to watch you crumble, but you walked out wearing armor. They expected you to melt under the heat. They counted on heartbreak to hollow you out, betrayal to finish you off, and pressure to snap you in half. And truth be told, there were nights it almost did. But instead of being reduced to ash, you came out refined, harder, sharper. You didn't just survive the fire, you became fireproof. Imagine gold in a furnace. To the untrained eye, it looks like it's being destroyed. Flames roar, impurities rise, the shape shifts. But what's really happening? The gold is being purified. That was you. Every attack, every lonely night, every mental war, it wasn't the end. It was the forge. They thought the fire was punishment. In reality, it was preparation. You might ask yourself, why didn't it break me like it breaks others? Because you didn't run from it. You faced it. You processed it. You let the pain rewire you instead of define you. That's why storms that once left you crumbling now barely shake you. The buttons they used to press don't even work anymore. They're still dealing with the memory of your old self, not realizing you've been upgraded through fire. Now you carry a calm they can't comprehend. They call it pride, but it's wisdom. They call it arrogance, but it's clarity. You're not numb. You're not cold. You're simply unshakable. Because once you've seen the worst darkness, the shadows don't scare you anymore. And here's the irony. The very fire meant to consume you ended up crowning you. What was supposed to be your downfall became your coronation. That's why you win now, effortlessly, because you're not fragile. You're forged. No weapon, no rumor, no betrayal can dent what has already been through the flames and survived. You're fireproof. And that's why they lost. Number 9. They tried to bury you in shame, but you built your empire from that soil. Humiliation doesn't destroy the chosen. It chisels them into who they were meant to be. They mocked you for stumbling, not realizing you were planting your foundation in silence. They thought their disrespect would break you. They thought exclusion, gossip, and mockery would crush your spirit and make you crawl back begging for approval. And yes, it stung. It cut deep. It left bruises nobody could see. But instead of letting humiliation poison you, you turned it into your teacher. You didn't let the shame kill your worth. You let it strip away everything false. Ego, people-pleasing, the mask of control. You were forced to stand naked in your own truth, and that's exactly where you found your real strength. Imagine a seed forced into the dirt, buried, pressed, surrounded by darkness. To most, it looks like an ending, but for the seed, it's the beginning of growth. That was you. What they thought was burial was actually planting. You sat with the humiliation, not to be crushed by it, but to grow through it. And you might ask, why didn't it harden me like it does others? Because you made a different choice. Most people let shame calcify into bitterness. You let it soften the right places, not into weakness, but into depth. You stop chasing applause. You stop performing for acceptance. You stop bleeding energy on proving yourself. Instead, you took every rejection, every disappointment, every sneer, and laid it down like bricks. Quietly, steadily, until an empire started rising where they swore you were finished. This is why your victory hits differently. It's not loud revenge. It's not petty clapbacks. It's the calm authority of someone who built peace out of chaos. If you had fought back from pride, you might have won a moment. But because you let it humble you, you won a lifetime. That's why this blessing is permanent. It isn't built on ego, it's built on evolution. And now they're stunned. They thought they buried you in humiliation. They didn't realize they were handing you the soil to construct something untouchable. The empire you walk in now carries their fingerprints, not because they built it, but because their cruelty became your cornerstone. Number 10. You stopped knocking. You became the door they can't ignore. When you become the key, you don't beg for entry. The locks beg for you. Access isn't forced when your presence is the password. They expected you to beg. They thought you'd hustle endlessly for validation, force your way into rooms, manipulate, perform, compromise just to get noticed. That's how they move, chasing applause like it's oxygen. But you, chosen one, refused to play that game. You didn't force your way into circles that didn't value you. You focused on alignment. You did the work in silence. You healed. You grew. You recalibrated. And that inner transformation did what begging never could. It made you magnetic. Imagine this, while others are pounding on locked doors, desperate for access, you're becoming the architect who builds a house so powerful the doors start swinging open on their own. That's you. You didn't have to demand space. Your presence created it. You didn't need to convince anyone. The weight of who you've become did the convincing for you. And maybe you wonder, how did my quiet work start echoing so loudly? Because when you're aligned, you carry a frequency the world can't ignore. That's why rooms are whispering your name. That's why people look twice when you walk in. They don't see the years of rewiring, the nights of reflection, the choices that hardened your foundation. But they feel it. They feel the shift when you show up. You stopped chasing doors that weren't yours. You stopped wasting energy on spaces that didn't match your worth. And in that stillness, you became the door. Now opportunities don't just open, they're drawn to you. People who once dismissed you are circling back, but this time you're not desperate. You're discerning. You know exactly who you are, and that's the kind of authority no platform can manufacture. That's why this season is untouchable. You didn't force it. You became it. You are the key. You are the door. You are the reason the room even matters now. And no lock, no gatekeeper, no delay can keep what you've become from being recognized. Number 11. You outgrew applause. Now you walk in authority they can't revoke. Clapping hands fade, rooted power doesn't. Validation is rented. Authority is owned. You stopped craving the crowd. You stopped measuring your worth by how many eyes were on you or how many voices were cheering. You realized the most fragile foundation you could ever stand on is applause, because applause shifts, people flip, and public opinion is always up for sale to the highest bidder. That's why you stepped back, not because you were fading, but because you were being lifted into a different league. Think about it. Validation is like smoke. It looks real until you reach for it, and then it slips through your fingers. But authority, true authority, that's forged in storms, in setbacks, in nights where you had nothing left but still didn't fold. Authority is born in silence, strengthened in pain, and proven in endurance. That's why no one can hand it to you, and no one can strip it away. They didn't understand your silence. They thought you disappeared, gave up, or had nothing going on. But what they couldn't see was the elevation happening behind closed doors. You weren't being overlooked, you were being prepared. While they were chasing likes, you were chasing depth. While they were auditioning for approval, you were being appointed in private. And here's the shift. You no longer explain yourself. You don't need to defend your process. You're not desperate to fit into rooms that can't contain you. You're not chasing relevance. You're rooted in reality. The confidence you carry doesn't come from who sees you. It comes from who you've become. That's why pressure doesn't crush you now. That's why noise doesn't distract you. Authority isn't loud. Authority doesn't beg. Authority doesn't seek validation. It walks into a room and shifts the air without saying a word. And that's exactly what you've become. While others were addicted to applause, you were being crowned with something untouchable. Now they can't revoke it. They can't vote it away. They can't fake it. Because what you carry isn't borrowed. It's yours. Number 12. You didn't just survive the process. You turned it into your blueprint. Endurance is survival. Mastery is transformation. The same fire that broke others became the classroom where you earned your crown. Most people stumble through the process half asleep. They complain, compare, and collapse. They see delays as punishments, disappointments as failures, and detours as dead ends. But you, chosen one, you did something rare. You leaned in. You studied every setback like it was a textbook. You paid attention to the lessons hidden inside every closed door, every betrayal, every lonely night. You weren't just enduring the process. You were mastering it. Imagine a sculptor chipping away at stone. To outsiders, it looks like destruction, like wasted effort. But the sculptor sees what's beneath the surface. That's what you did. Life kept chipping at you, and instead of breaking, you paid attention to what was being revealed. You let the fire strip away false identities. You let the silence train your patience. You let the waiting seasons strengthen your discernment. And maybe you've asked yourself, why did it take so long? Why so much pain? Because preparation isn't punishment. It's protection. If the blessing had come too soon, it might have destroyed you. But by staying in the furnace, you became strong enough to carry it. You stopped asking, why me? And started asking, what is this teaching me? That shift turned your trials into training. While others were distracted, you were sharpening. While they numbed their pain, you sat with yours until it became wisdom. You broke cycles. You healed wounds. You upgraded your mindset piece by piece. That's not surviving. That's mastery. Now people are stunned. They look at you and wonder how you're so calm, so grounded, so unshakable. The answer is simple. You did the work. You didn't take shortcuts. You didn't fake the healing. You respected the process even when it burned. And because of that, your wins won't be temporary. That's why it worked. Because you didn't just crawl out of the fire, you came out carrying the blueprint. You're not only prepared to receive what's yours, you're equipped to protect it, sustain it, and lead with it. They thought you'd fold in the waiting. Instead, you built an empire inside it. Number 13. Letting go was the masterstroke they mistook for weakness. Control is fragile. Alignment is unbreakable. What they called weakness was the quiet genius of surrender. They thought your calm meant defeat. They mistook your silence for fear, your patience for passivity, your surrender for weakness. But chosen one, what they didn't understand is that letting go wasn't you quitting. It was you mastering the art of alignment. While they were burning themselves out, forcing doors that weren't theirs, you were sitting in clarity, waiting for the locks that recognized your key. That wasn't laziness. That was strategy. Imagine someone trying to push a river upstream. The more they strain, the more exhausted they get, and still the current wins. Now picture yourself not fighting the water, but flowing with it. That's why things started to move in your favor. Not because you begged or forced, but because you surrendered to the current that was already carrying you where you belonged. And maybe you've asked, why did I choose surrender when everyone else was chasing so hard? Because you learned the difference between glitter and gold. You realized that forcing things only creates fractures. You understood that what is truly yours won't need manipulation, noise, or panic. That kind of wisdom looks insane to people addicted to control. But it's the very reason you're winning now. They don't understand how you stayed calm when life looked like it was collapsing. They don't get how you knew to wait, to stay still, to trust the timing. They call it luck. But it wasn't luck. It was insight. It was discipline. It was choosing alignment over urgency, peace over panic. That's not weakness. That's intelligence at its highest form. Now the same ones who laughed at your surrender are watching doors open that can't be explained. Opportunities are finding you. Alignments are falling into place. Not forced, not fake, real. And they're stunned because while they were exhausting themselves for crumbs, you were preparing to inherit the feast. That's why it worked. Because you didn't just fight harder, you grew wiser. You didn't just chase, you became magnetic. You didn't force the game, you rewrote the rules. And now, the victory isn't just yours for a moment. It's yours forever. And now, chosen one, we've come full circle. Whatever they tried, whatever they plotted, it all backfired because your growth outlasted their games. You didn't just win, you became the proof that the universe crowns those who refuse to fold. This isn't luck. This is alignment, strategy, and undeniable victory. If this message resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and drop the number 77 in the comments so I know you're walking in this same energy. Share this with someone who needs the reminder. Whatever they did, it didn't work. You already won.